This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Hope Larson and Rebecca Mock. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek.
And I'm Gwen, and we're two people with PhDs talking about comics.
And on this episode, Gwen and I have the pleasure of talking with Hope Larson and Rebecca Mock. Their new book, Knife's Edge, comes out later this month from Farrar, Straus and Giroux. But before we get to that conversation, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by those wonderful folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are usually 20 to 35% off of the cover price. And every single month, you're going to find some incredible specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off the cover price. Sometimes 50% off cover. But every now and again, you can find discounts that are more impressive than that.
That's right, Derek. And a couple of the comic series that Hope Larson works on, we mentioned in our podcast today, are available at DCB Service. We have the Goldie Vance series. We have the Collected Volume 1, which is $6.49, 35% off of the list price. We also have the Batgirl Volume 1, Beyond Burnside, that Hope worked on, and that is for $10.19, which is 40% off cover. So if you listen to our podcast today and find those are some titles you want to take a look at, and you should because they're awesome, then you can go to our friends
at Discount Comic Book Service. You know, you can't find a better place to get better discounts. That's dcbservice.com. You gotta go there. It's required for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your books there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that Gwen and Derek sent you. Gwen, this was a fun conversation with Hope and Rebecca.
It was. We learned so much, not only about their process and the way that they came together to write this really exciting series, but also about some of their future projects. It was just a blast listening to them talk about the way they collaborate.
Yeah, it really was. Well, let's let our listeners hear what we discussed.
Well, it's really great today to be here with you, Hope and Rebecca. And we thought we'd start off today's interview show by asking a little bit about the genesis of this project, how you got together on it, and some of the fun stuff that you've learned about each other and about the process as you've gone along.
Cool. Well, I guess I'll start because I originated this project at the very beginning.
Indeed.
So this Compass South and Knife's Edge, the 4 Points series, came about after I had done A Wrinkle in Time for FSG, which is our publisher for our Straus and Giroux, an imprint of Macmillan. And I'd spent a couple of years on Wrinkle in Time. I had racked up some goodwill with my publisher, and I thought I really want to do a classic adventure story, because that was the kind of thing that I grew up reading and loving so much as a kid, like Asterix, Tintin, that kind of thing. That was what got me into comics in the first place. And that was what I'd been wanting to make for a while. And I was also really thinking a lot about reluctant readers, and I'd been contacted by a number of different parents about Wrinkle in Time and heard stories about that being the first book that their kids would read on their own. And I thought, I want to do another book that is accessible to that audience, that reluctant reader audience. So I put together, it must have been a pretty rough outline. I don't actually remember at this point because it was a few years ago. And started looking for an artist, because you can't really sell a book until you have an artist attached. put out a call on Twitter. And Rebecca, I think one of your friends suggested you. Is that right?
Yeah. Annie Stoll retweeted.
Oh, was it Annie?
Yeah. She knew. I'm forever grateful to Annie Stoll. It's all her doing. And I immediately sent you a PDF of my comics. And you emailed me back and we started talking.
Yeah, because Rebecca's work was years ago. And even then her work was amazing. I knew that I really needed to be working with somebody who was great at not just character acting, but also historical stuff and locations, because this series is the settings and the locations are just as important as the characters are. And she had all that stuff going on.
That's so nice. Thank you. I remember being very insecure about my comics at that time. So it was like being, I was just surprised the whole time that we were working together. I was just shocked. But it was definitely when you sent me the outline, I remember immediately loving the idea of not just a historical setting, because I'd always loved those kinds of stories, but a girl disguised as a boy, that type of story, that trope was something that I was very much interested in. So I was immediately really interested in developing the story and all the locations too.
Wow. So we've been talking a little bit about how you guys came together for the first book in the 4-point series, Compass South. And we should mention that Compass South came out, I think, June of last year. And then later this month, Knife's Edge, the second book, will be released. How, for those who haven't read Compass South and are anticipating the new book, how would you introduce this to the uninitiated?
Ooh, introduce Knife's Edge?
Yeah, or Compass South, the series. In other words, what's the pitch for the story?
Yeah, I usually pitch it as
pitch.
It's a throwback adventure story in the vein of Robert Louis Stevenson. So it's kidnapped, Treasure Island, all of that stuff.
Treasure Island, Huckleberry Finn, Oliver Twist, all thrown into one pot.
Kids in peril in a very dangerous world with no adult supervision.
Throwing all those guys into one pot would actually make a good adventure comic, now that I think about it.
Oh my gosh!
It would.
Yeah, they did that, right? That's a comic. What's it called? They made a movie. Sean Connery was in it.
That's right.
Yeah, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yes.
Is that what you're? Yeah. Kind of a failed movie, many would say. Yeah.
I love that movie. Be over here on this island, loving that movie.
So the series is called 4 Points, and am I right in assuming that you guys have a planned 4 volumes for 4 Points?
You're wrong.
Oh, really?
Oh, no.
Well,
unfortunately,
I'm not sure that we'll get to do more. We would love to. Or I would love to. I'll just speak for myself. I would love to do more 4 Points for sure.
Oh,
but
yeah,
it's awesome. Okay. Well, it really depends on sales. It's it depends on how these books do for the publisher and if they're willing to pick up more of them. We have talked a little bit about where the story would go in the future. And I feel like Rebecca has all these amazing ideas. I haven't really thought about it. I'm just I'm going to write Rebecca's ideas if we get to do more books, because they're so good.
Guys, write that down. I have a lot of ideas, but yeah, no, it's I feel like the outline that you sent originally sort of wrapped up where Knife's Edge wraps up. That's as far as it was fleshed out, but there were, even in that initial outline, some threads that we still have not explored with some of the side characters, which would be really exciting to explore if we got the chance.
Yeah, absolutely. I always try and leave things a little bit open-ended, just the way that you would if you were writing a blockbuster or something like that. You've always got to leave the door open for a sequel, but you also have to end it in a satisfying place. So that's kind of what I tried to do here.
Yeah, this would actually make... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Derek.
No, I was going to say, this is interesting in that, I guess, when I was reading both of the books, I was just assuming, and I have to admit, unlike Gwen, that I didn't read Compass South until I heard about Knife's Edge, although Compass South was on my reading list. But once I got a review copy of Knife's Edge, I went back to read Compass South before Knife's Edge, and I had thought that this may be more than 2 volumes for a couple of reasons. One, 2 of the important items in this narrative, and we learned this early on in the first book, is a compass and a knife. And so the series is called 4 Points. I was thinking of the 4 points of a compass, north, south, east, west. And the way that the stories end in each volume, each could be a self-contained narrative where you finish it and you wouldn't think that anything else would necessarily need to come after. But it's also written in such a way that something could come after. And since we have the second book, I just assumed that there would be more. But my assumptions were off, I guess.
That's so funny you say that. I've thought about this too. If there were other books, they would need to be associated with an object, and what could those objects be? Because they sort of play into the theme of the swashbuckler high sword adventure. Yeah, the sword, a map, perhaps.
Map would be cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for like sort of spin-offs and side stories. What I think is it's just that a lot of the characters are very there's a lot of dimension to them. They're very well developed. They have this backstory that's like hinted at, and we don't really know where they're going to go, which is a testament to all to Hope's writing, that there's such a huge cast of these great characters that you really do want to know more about them.
And also your character designs is more and more when no, it's true. I don't feel like I ever get to know the characters that I'm writing until I see the designs for them in comics. And that's like with you, with Brittany Williams on Goldie Vance, with the folks that I work with on Batgirl. I don't really write a ton of description into my characters. And when I see how the artists have designed them and also how they act them, if that makes sense. So like how they hold themselves and their facial expressions and how they move or how you could imagine them moving, then I get to know those characters better. And it's like, oh, okay, now I know who you are and I can write you.
And it's the most amazing thing. Like, when you send me the initial script and like your character description for Tarboro was that he had like a face like the pushed in
like
pug
a pug
dog or like a bulldog, and that he had bow legs. Like I think that was it. And then when I get to draw him and send it back to you, then like in later versions of the script, some details come in that seem like they're at least partially inspired by my drawings, and it becomes this incredible feedback loop that's just one of the most satisfying things about working together.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I feel like it's so frustrating to me that artists don't get as much credit for being creators in comics as they should, because there's just no way to divide up the workflow.
Right.
Like I say that I do all the writing, but that's what's writing and what isn't in a comic.
For folks listening at home who want a scholarly reference to this, there's a really great article from a few years back by a comics scholar called Jared Gardner, who's at Ohio State University. And he wrote a article called Storylines. It's in a journal called Substance. And it's actually volume 41. I'm frightening how I know that. Anyway, but he talks, he writes about how he did a study of Alan Moore and Alec Campbell's work. And I think it was from Hell, right, Derek? I've got that right. And he talks about what the script, Eddie Campbell, thank you. I knew I was doing something wrong. He talks about how the script looked and then what the comic looked like. And he sort of did a backwards process of looking at what line style and those sort of illustrative things do to a script, how that's so additive and sometimes even transformative. So there is actually, and I actually do this sort of work too. This is the sort of scholarship I really love. So it's so exciting to hear you two talk this way, because it is really interesting to see what the comics creator brings to the script.
Yeah, it's. I think that it's important to sort of know both ends of the creative process, to know about writing and to know about the drawing part of comics, because otherwise it makes it very difficult for two parts of a team to communicate with each other if they don't understand what the other person is, the labor that goes into what they're doing. Which is another great thing about working with Hope, is that because she's an artist and a writer, she sort of knows both sides and can help me along. And at the very beginning, I needed a lot of help.
You didn't need that much help.
You offered it, and it was so good. There was a lot of wisdom.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. You guys were talking about character designs. One of the things I think is so striking about both of these books, Compass South and Knife's Edge, is what you do with twins and twinning. Now, we definitely have the protagonist who are twins, Cleopatra or Cleo, and Alexander Dodge. But then early on, they meet another pair of twins, Silas and Edwin. And on top of that, you introduce mistaken identity, or the very concept of taking over someone else's identity, and doing that within the framework of twins and twinning, which I found fascinating in that earlier you mentioned in terms of novels for younger readers, Mark Twain and Huckleberry Finn. And, this is a theme that Twain would come back to multiple times, most notably in Pudd'nhead Wilson.
Is it? Because I haven't read those books since I was a kid.
Oh, yes. In Pudd'nhead Wilson.
This is interesting.
And
it's built upon too.
It is. It's built upon the scaffolding of the twin, and one twin being mistaken and intentionally taking the identity of the other.
Yeah, mistaken identity is a theme that I love to play with, or that I love to read, and it was a lot of fun to play with.
Yeah, the whole twin thing. I don't know why I'm so. It's something that comes up again and again and again in my books. Mercury's an obvious example, where I have two characters separated by time who are relatives and basically look exactly the same.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
I'm not a twin, and I don't even think I know any twins personally. For me, it's just I love this idea of two sides of the self. And I think that's what ultimately I'm writing about, is that we all contain these disparate versions of ourselves, and different versions that come out at different times and in different circumstances, and depending on who we're with.
And of course, in this text, gender plays a big part in that dynamic.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I one of the things I loved most about the initial outline, and I loved about drawing it, was exploring how the character Cleo has this fluid gender identity that she gets the chance to discover over the course of the story.
Yeah,
So-
you brought so much to that element of the story, Rebecca, which I really love. I mean, as a straight person, I was writing it from one perspective, but then Rebecca came onto the project and just brought like 60 other levels to what was going on with the gender stuff, which is really so cool.
I think Cleo there's parts of Cleo that we can both very strongly relate to. I felt like reading the script, you were putting a lot of your own experiences and perspectives into her character development, and it was a lot of fun to put my own perspective in as well. And she became this very multifaceted character. And it was not just her, but there was a lot of characters that I felt like I knew a lot about their backstory, even if it wasn't in the script. I wrote a lot of queer backstories for a lot of the characters.
I love that. I love it so much.
It was fun.
And then in the first book, especially, we have that other set of twins, Silas and Edwin. And so that kind of doubles, so to speak, the complications that arise, including the introduction of relationship, or if we want to call it sexual tension. I mean, we're dealing with, younger characters here. But there is this potential for romance, and not just, let's say,
romantic tension.
Yes. Silas and Cleo, but also there's Silas and a character that, I was wanting to see more of from the first book, Sar.
Yes, I love Sar.
We both wanted more Sar.
She had sort of more, in an earlier draft, there was a sort of or it wasn't more, but it was a different sort of way that you introduced her.
Oh, yeah. What happened with that was that chapter got rewritten several times because our editor didn't like it initially. I very rarely get notes like that. I mean, she's a very, very tough editor, which I love, love, love about her. This is one of the few times where I've gotten a note from her that's just like, no, I just wasn't feeling this one. It needs to be more exciting. It needs to be more something. So that chapter got completely rewritten.
Sar there was like a waterfall involved. Sar had like a goat.
Yeah, there was a thing with a goat and a lost. No, I think it was a calf, right?
Oh, I think
I
it was
don't
a
remember.
Calf.
This is like lost to the sands of time. I deleted that chapter and I remember so little about it.
It was lovely.
Yeah. Well, also in terms of the relationship tension, there's a character we haven't mentioned yet, and that is Luther. And he's someone who's introduced to us in Compass South, and he makes it all the way through into the second book almost completely. And there's something between Luther and Cleo as well. And for these reasons, Luther, Silas, it seems to me that Cleo is much more of a central figure than Alex is, because there's more potential for her and where she could go, or the potential problems that she may have throughout the two books than with Alex.
Yeah, well, she's sort of working at a disadvantage to start out with, because she's been kept down by her gender all her life. So she has a lot of unlearning and stepping up to do to sort of survive in this world. And to figure out who she is. Whereas the world is more set up for Alex as a boy, and he doesn't have as far to go. But I think that if we got to do more books, the next book would definitely be an Alex-focused book, and we would rip the rug out from under him.
I would be so excited for that. I think he got a lot of development in Compass South. His character arc with the ship and with Charborough and with Edwin was those were some of my favorite scenes to draw, and I felt like the place that he found himself in Knife's Edge was a little more secure. He had a plan for the time being of where he wanted to go, which I thought was very sweet, that he had this dream that he was working towards, and it was cool to also see him use some of the skills that he developed in Compass South. Like he's saved people from drowning, so he's a good swimmer, and he gets to use that skill. And he gets to do a lot of sailor things, which is pretty cool.
Are either of you sailors yourself? Did you have to do a lot of research to,
oh my God.
pull this together?
That was
like,
the
I
worst.
just have to say that there's like this scene in Knife's Edge, and I don't want to really give it away for our listeners, but it involves practically dismantling a ship. And I was thinking, wow, that's so technical and all these terms.
Yeah.
So.
No,
How did you write that scene?
That scene is okay. So I'm just going to back it up. I don't sail. I don't know anything about boats. I know more about boats than I used to. I did a ton of research. I found this great reference book, Seamanship in the Age of Sail, which Rebecca and I both have, which has been really invaluable because it goes into the nitty-gritty of how these tall ships work, especially under different weather circumstances, and how the sails, because they're these really complicated machines. Right. There are 3 masts with 3+ sails each,
and about 1 million ropes.
So that was the hardest part, was just trying to wrap my brain around these things, how they work, how they would be working in each scene. And the scene that you're talking about, Gwen, in Knife's Edge, is based on actual events that I read about, and it was like, that's crazy. Wow. I gotta put that in the book.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, somebody actually did that stuff.
Wow. That is so cool.
Yep.
It was a lot of fun drawing that, because the cool thing about the ship is that you see it from a lot of different perspectives. And all of a sudden, I was drawing it at a very interesting angle. And unlike a stationary room, you can sort of play with a lot of things, like how light is cast through different windows and holes, and how water sort of changes the shape that the characters can, or the shape of the space that the characters can move through. It opens up a lot of potential for comics and for action.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of fun. Oh, and I also I didn't know anything about sailing. To also put those cards on the table. I learned all about boats for these books, and now I love them.
See, now I have this theory that you're going to like build a ship by hand. Like you know, I just love it when people say this, like, I've read everything there is to read about it. And then I'm thinking, like, 10 months later, there'll be something on People magazine. Hope Larson builds her own boat.
I don't think I would actually like being on a boat very much.
I know, I always get seasick, so I was just laughing.
My brother sails. He spent like a couple months on a ship. Yeah, he sailed from the east coast of America to Europe with some pals.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't a sail ship. It was like a sailboat. But so that's
even
in my
scarier,
blood
maybe.
somewhere.
Have you guys heard of Maiden Trip?
Of what?
Maiden Trip. It's a document. Okay. Oh my God. Okay, you guys have to watch this documentary. It's about this. Yeah, it's about this young woman in the Netherlands who fights with the government there to have the right to sail around the world, to be the youngest person who ever does it, and she does it.
I know about this. I know about this girl. I read about it.
It's such a good film because much of it is actually filmed by her as she's on the boat. Oh my gosh, you guys, you absolutely have to like watch this now because it's going to bring your.
It's going to give me anxiety.
It won't,
yeah, I thought
seriously.
that too.
No, don't worry. She doesn't tear her boat apart or anything. But but I think you'd both really like it because it's very much, in many ways, a commentary on gender roles in the 21st century and what young women are or are not encouraged to do. So,
what we're allowed to do. Very cool.
You know, Gwen was talking about that particular scene in Knife's Edge that was so notable. And that reminds me of another important character, although someone that we really don't see until the second book, Knife's Edge, as much. And that is what I guess one could consider the villain of the narrative, although I put that in qualifying quotes, and that's Felix Worley and his ship, the El Caluche. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed and appreciated what the two of you did with Worley in this second book, in that we got to see quite a bit of his backstory, and we got to see him not as a two-dimensional villain as much as a human. And I don't want to give anything away about where he comes from or why he seems to be the way that he is, but let's just say that you have given him in this second book full treatment, along with his partner, Louisa.
Louisa.
I love Louisa. The relationship is... Yeah, those were so much fun to write. Some of my favorite stuff to write in the book, for sure. Mm-hmm. And I love their messed up relationship.
Yeah, I have so many, like, headcanons and thoughts about their relationship. I remember you tweeted something, or you wrote something in an interview while I was drawing Knife's Edge, and after you'd finished the script, about how you were like done writing villains that were just two-dimensional, because nobody in real life is just a two-dimensional evil person. Right. Like, it doesn't exist.
I've actually, the thing that's funny is I've sort of flipped around on that since Trump. And I now can visualize a two-dimensional, just straight up evil dude. But I don't think they're very, if that's true. But it's they're harder to write. Yeah. And not as much fun to write. I prefer villains whose villainy comes out of like a hurt or like some sort of human moment where they just went the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I love that you sort of don't know what happens for a lot of Felix's life, and a lot of like what happens to him and Luisa is still very much a mystery, but you get just this small window into it, which leaves so much room for imagining like their triumphs and their failures throughout their lives and how they've like come that far. But there's like one little detail that carries through. They have these like red sashes that they wear. So like, even if you don't know what happens, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but if you can notice in Compass South and Knife's Edge that Felix and Luisa and Ruben, the guy with the eye patch that hangs out with them, they all have these red kerchiefs around their neck, and that has something to do with their backstory.
Well, Rebecca, one question I have for you is that, you had worked in comics previously, but I believe that Compass South and then now Knife's Edge, these were your first graphic novels?
Yes.
So I'm curious about this experience, right? How working with Hope on these two books, has this changed the way that you approach your art in any way?
Yes, I would say it has built the foundation upon which I think about all of my comic work now. Because before I had a rough understanding of how to put a page together and how to put a short story together, how to design characters. I had no idea how to comprehend the scope of a full book and the work that goes into it. And it really completely flipped the way I think about each page. Whereas before, each page I thought of as like a little work of art, a little illustration. Now, when I think about it in perspective of a full book, each page is a step to the end goal of a full story. And so it's not as precious, but it's also more important to think of in a systematic way and to complete each step, to finish each page. And it's a lot less daunting. I feel powerful in a weird way, in a great way.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
So do you see yourself writing more long-form narratives or illustrating more long-form narratives in the future?
I would really like to. If for no other reason than I feel like I still want to understand more about the writing process to improve my ability to work with writers. I think it's really important to develop like every dimension of being a comic artist, but I do really like working on a team. So one of my goals is to, I'm working on a short series right now called The Old Woman. And it's really just
so good.
Thank you. It's just an exercise in story writing for me. And the end goal is to finish that short story series and move on to another project and sort of try to build my skills.
Wow. Well, I sort of wanted to interject for you, Hope, specifically, as I was saying before we started today's interview, your novel Chiggers was one that really introduced to me the promise of what children's comics could be. When you think about comics creators who have come after you, like Raina Telgemeier and Victoria Jameson and Shannon McHale just recently doing Real Friends, really, I think a lot of the genesis of that was from Chiggers, which was a novel that you did, about maybe 10 years ago now.
Longer, I think.
Yeah, but there you were working on your own entirely. Now you're working as a team. Is there, if you want to talk maybe just a little bit about that difference between working on a project yourself and working with someone else?
Yeah. Well, I actually still do graphic novels completely on my own, but not very often because I find it just very isolating, and it's like not good for my brain, basically, to draw a whole graphic novel. I just really prefer getting to focus on the writing part and making that as good as I can, and then partnering with somebody who's focusing on the art and making that as good as they can. Because then, for me, it's a superior product than what I could ever produce just by myself. And I know a lot of people look at graphic novels and comics by cartoonists, somebody who writes and draws, as being superior, but I think that's silly, and it's really just how you prefer to work. So for me, the superior product that I can make is by working with somebody else. And I also just really, we keep coming back to this idea of collaboration, and for me, that is so exciting and so much fun. And I love working with editors. I love working with artists, letterers, colorists, all of those people. who are at the top of their game. And it's just exciting to me. It's like this big production where we're all like keeping this thing rolling. Anything could happen. It could come together. It could fall apart. It's like a movie, you know? And I like that. There are all these random elements that come into the project, which, you know, for good or ill, I've had it go both ways.
Yeah.
But I like that. It feels very alive.
Cool.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, no, go ahead, Derek.
No, I was going to say, this is interesting because, Hope, I was first introduced to your work with those early books, Gray Horses and then Salamander Dream. And I have to admit, I have not yet read Chiggers. And so Gwen and I were talking right before we had you guys on for the interview that my first introduction to your work was very different than Gwen's introduction to your work. And so it's interesting that we've come from different perspectives. But I guess since Chiggers, you have tended to do a number of comics that are for, if not younger audiences, then all ages. And you currently you've worked on Local, you currently work on Batgirl. And then something that I know both Gwen and I really appreciate is that series Goldie Vance.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've done a lot of work. And it's interesting that you mentioned the way that you came into my body of work and how the two of you have had different introductions to it, because now I think there are so many more options for really weird entry points or very different entry points, because I've done like very indie books and I've done literary graphic novels and I've done, Goldie Vance over at Boom and Batgirl now. So and all these audiences don't really intersect that much. I feel like I'm writing for different audiences for all of those different things, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, it's also the first chapter of a book I'm currently writing on children's comics and about how it is such a fascinating field right now and really Hope your career shows this, you're working for a mainstream major comics creator, right? And so then you're also doing indie work. You've done an adaptation and these texts are for a more traditional children's lit publisher. And so you really are actually looking at a market that is, you will have kids who will read all of those texts, but you're right. I mean, I'm sure that if you're at a convention signing Batgirl, you're having a very different set of interactions than if you're doing something like this,
Completely different. And I would have, if I could go back, I don't know that I might try to make my career a little more streamlined and focused. But honestly, a big part of the way that it is the way it is because none of these books or outlets pays me enough to live on. So I really have to, and I have like non-compete clauses in most of my contracts. So I can't just go out and do like 6 graphic novels at the same time. I have to supplement it with comic books and like the mainstream and all that stuff. And I really genuinely love doing all of this stuff, but it's kind of a function of this is my only skill set and I need to work it however I can. I have to hustle. And talking to a lot of other women creatives that I know, people in film and writers and stuff, that's just how it is for most of us. Very few of us have the luxury to just focus on the one thing that we do the best.
Yeah.
Because we gotta make a living somehow, right?
Right.
Yeah. I think it works out for the best too. I think you're right. Or I think I agree that it's more fun to focus on lots of different things.
Yeah.
But just the one thing.
But the marketplace is there for that too. And I think that's really the biggest difference over the last 10 years. And that's why I sort of say, Hope, your career seems to have almost followed the industry too, in the way that it has shifted so much. And that's really what's fascinating because you're right. I mean, I could see a kid having their teacher give them A Wrinkle in Time and entering into figuring out who you are that way. Whereas another kid maybe is at a traditional bookstore picking up Knife's Edge, or at their comic shop picking up Batgirl. So there are different ways that kids are going to interact with your work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I do like that when I exhibit at shows now, when I table, if somebody walks up to my table, I can probably sell them something because I'll have something that they will have some kind of interest in,
Rebecca, do you have any interests in doing work for any of the mainstream publishers?
Sure. I like to leave myself open to opportunities. I work in a lot of different mediums, just not in the comics world right now. So I've done like animation, video games, advertising, editorial, and spec work for a lot of different clients. And I enjoy having all these different perspectives on the illustration industry. And I've gotten a small peek at some of the other comics mainstream publishers. And I think that's probably something that's going to happen down the line if I can hustle, if I can get there. I think it'd be really fun.
Yeah. You mentioned your work in other media, and I'm thinking in particularly of animation. How do you feel that your work in animation informs your illustration in comics?
Well, I'd say it might be the other way around. I think that my interest in comics has led me to work in animation. Because I started as an illustrator, and because I had this interest in storytelling and this interest in moments, or moment-to-moment storytelling, I started adding animation to my work. And comics still influence the way I do illustration, for sure. Like working on these graphic novels has also improved my illustration practice because I can so easily quickly sketch ideas and think about things in like the perspective of a full scene rather than just one little drawing.
Hey, one thing that we haven't really talked about is color.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's a topic we'd like to address. Because let's talk it, because really the mood in these texts is sometimes so thrilling and suspenseful, and I just can't help but to feel that color is playing a part. So if you both want to talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
That's all Rebecca.
I mean, Hope has put a lot of she puts a lot of description into the scenes in the script. So a lot of, or at least for a few of them, I had very clear direction on where to go with the color and light. We can talk about. We went through some different colorists at the beginning of this project, and sort of ended up with me doing it as like a last resort, because I had never done color in my comics before.
Are you serious?
Or I'd done like one short comic, a 12-page comic with color, and it was not good. It was bad.
But your illustrations, your color illustrations are amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy with how the colors turned out, because I struggle with them. I just go through about 12 different versions.
You're so funny, because you're one of the best colorists that I know, and it's so funny to me to hear you talk this way.
I suffer
like
so much.
You're that person who is so at the top of their game they can't even see it. It's really funny.
It was like imagine like the day before this book goes to print, I'm in the Macmillan offices, crouching over Andrew at his design desk saying, no, the color's wrong. I need to go back home and change this. I'll email you. And like saying that for about 20 of the pages. Like that was my life, because each time I couldn't figure it out and we had to print it out again and I had to change things. I was really learning as I went. And so I am very, very proud with how it came out.
Yeah, because, I was just going to really say really quickly to follow up on that, I would compare you to Jordi Belair. I mean, to me,
you can't compare to Jordi Belair.
Yes, you can, because I just finished reviewing the second book in the Nameless City trilogy, and it's funny because then coming to Knife's Edge, I had the same feeling that I had with their series, which is, oh my God, the color is playing such a role in this. It's such a strong conveyor of emotion, and it's moving the story. So really, Rebecca, regardless of what you think about your own abilities, this is really great work.
Yeah, Jordi was, I think I referenced, or like I definitely looked at some of Jordi's work when I was figuring out the colors for Compass South and Knife's Edge. There also, we looked at a lot of Carrasco books.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That was a big influence on my colors, and so is the Christoph Blaine books that we reference. Or like he did a lot of high seas adventure books, or a few at least.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pulled from that.
Isaac the Pirate.
Yes, Isaac the Pirate was a big influence, not just on color, but on a lot of the sea, like the open sea scenes and the ship sort of in the midst of the ocean. Like I was always thinking about Isaac the Pirate.
You know, that brings us back to something, Rebecca, that you mentioned earlier in the interview, and that is in terms of illustrating the scenes where they're at sea, you could do a lot that maybe you couldn't do when the characters were on land in terms of perspective, angle, lighting, and whatnot. That also brings me back to my earlier question about animation, because with the colors, with the visuals, you can really play around with perspective in a way that accentuates action. My earlier question is, you know, if your work in animation informs your comics, I was actually thinking that maybe that was the case because you handle action so well, and not all illustrators do.
Well, thank you.
And I found, just anecdotally, that those illustrators who have some experience in animation seem to handle action, and not just fights or quick movements, but any kind of movement a little more adeptly. And I'm thinking in particular of Tony Cliff. And, Gwen and I both absolutely love the Delilah Dirk series.
The king of sound effects.
Yeah.
That's Tony Cliff.
And you know what he does in those books, you can tell that he is an animator, and he has brought those skills at movement and representing movement into still images. And so I thought that may be the case with you. And then you add in the work that you've done with color that really does add a different perspective of a particular scene. And I think that feeds into movement as well.
That's interesting. I definitely looked at Delilah Dirk as an influence as well, for color and for action. I think I was also looking at, there's a series, or there's a collection of comic books called Black Sad. It's there. He does action, or that team does action so incredibly well. They frame everything like perfectly, and it's so dramatic. But honestly, I really didn't study animation, especially not character animation. And even in my animation now, I'm always only animating objects and animating lights. So as far as the action scenes, I was very reliant on other comic artists' ways of portraying action. And I was learning very much from scratch from day one, from Hope's scripts. And she worked very hard to write the action scenes. And she did a great job. So that was a big help. And then I was just like poring over other comics, like how do you draw this? I think it helps that I have a lot of interest in gesture drawing. I have a lot of interest in slapstick comedy, and in slapstick in comics. So that, like, as a kid, I was reading those sort of like mid-50s action comics. I really love that, like, vintage style of action comics. So I think that played a bit in there.
Now, the two of you were mentioning earlier that as of now, there are no concrete plans for any books in the 4-point series beyond Knife's Edge. But if the sale's there, I mean, you will consider continuing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I have lots of ideas. I might try to draw like a little fan comic at some point, just to keep the interest going, just to get to whet people's appetite. So I'd say look out for that.
Yay! Yeah, actually, we are working on another book that's a standalone graphic novel, which we can't really say much about. But
completely outside of the series?
It's completely outside of the series. I think it will feel like a cousin to the series.
Oh my gosh.
But
it's very much in our brand, I think.
It's historical, it's adventure-y, it's more magical than this series. It's more straight up fantasy.
It's more feminine.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited now, because when you said that there wasn't another book planned after this one, I was so depressed. I wasn't saying anything, but now that you've said this, I feel so much better. So yay.
Yeah, it's really just like we were able to sell another graphic novel, but because the publisher doesn't really know yet how 4 Points is going to do, we couldn't have sold another volume of that series. Right. So that's kind of the situation that we ended up in. And I had outlined this next project in kind of a fever and was thinking about doing it as a novel, and then it ended up that I had the opportunity to just do it with Rebecca as a graphic novel, which is always my preference.
Cool.
So
I'm so
stay
pleased.
tuned. 2020.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We have to live for 2020, everyone.
2020.
Just survive until then.
Well, what about what each of you may be working on individually right now or in the near future? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm doing
Go
more
for it.
Batgirl. Still on Batgirl. That's been really fun. Let's see. What else? Batgirl, the graphic novel we're working on together that I can't talk about really. And I have a webcomic solo, which is very slow updating. Really, when I have free time, I'll do a page or two at solocomic.net. And I'm working on development on an animation project that I also can't talk about, but if it turns into an actual show, you'll hear about it. So
Cool.
That's where I am.
That's cool. I'm excited about all those things. I'm mostly just working on this new project of ours. I took some time off of work this month, and I'm just like poring over it. And then besides Knife's Edge coming out, I'm just working on the next chapter of Old Woman. And I do a lot of freelance illustrations, so mostly look out for new animations and GIFs and illustrations to come out. Oh, and there's a video game, Tacoma, by the company Fulbright, and that's coming out soon. And I did a lot of the concept art for it and some of the promo art for it. So that'll be out soon as well.
Oh, this is exciting.
Yeah. Well, Rebecca, you've mentioned The Old Woman a couple of times. I mean, where can listeners find out about this comic?
You can read excerpts of both of the chapters that are out on my website, RebeccaMock.com, and you can buy the PDFs of both chapters on my Gumroad, and there's a link to that right on my it's pinned to my Twitter profile page, and there's a link on my website as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Rebecca and Hope, we want to thank you again for being on the Comics Alternative, talking about the new book, Knife's Edge, which is the second in the 4-point series, and this comes out later in June.
Yeah, end of the month.
June 27th.
So
and I'll be at Heroes Con. It'll be after. You're going to be releasing this after Heroes Con, right? Probably.
Yes, and in fact, I'll be here. I'm in Charlotte right now, and
wow.
I will be at Heroes Con as well.
I'll be at Heroes Con on the Saturday, crashing at Rebecca's table.
That's right. We're going to be releasing Knife's Edge early to anyone who's at Heroes Con, so I
hope to
see
see both of you. The Comics Alternative will actually have a table there.
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
That's great.
I'll be sure to bring my copies of the books for you guys to sign.
Excellent.
Yes, please.
Yay! That's so cool.
Gwen, you have to come down now.
I can't because I have Children's Lit Association conference, but we will be actually
priorities.
No, I know, but the reality is I am giving a talk on the importance of children's comics. So someone's got to be out there doing that
fighting
work.
the good fight. Yeah,
that's
thank
right. And actually, Hope. Paul and I are going to be doing our Eisner show in about a week, and we'll be mentioning Batgirl, so you'll have to tune into that too, because we'll be talking about that. So congratulations on your nomination too.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, Derek, it looks like we have a lot to look forward to with this new team of Hope Larson and Rebecca Mock, including the unnamed text that will come out in 2020. So we have a lot to look forward to from this really talented team.
Yes, it is. And that was a great bit of news to hear that they're working on a book that's outside of this 4-point series. But, Gwen, I have to tell you that one of the biggest surprises for me during this conversation that we had with Rebecca and Hope was learning that, at least as of now, these are going to be the only 2 books in the 4-point series, which is interesting because when As I say in the interview, I didn't read Compass South until Knife's Edge was announced, and then I went back to read Compass South in this new book that's about to come out. Mm-hmm. But I read them within a mindset that they're part of a series. I didn't know how many volumes would be in this series, and I'm wondering how my experience of reading these two books would have been different if I saw them as maybe just, two volumes within a series that will have nothing outside of that. It's curious. I mean, I'll never be able to know that, but I think my expectations and the way that I was reading were very different before this interview.
Well, same here. And, one of the things that I will say is this is a really rich series. It's very imaginative. And as you said in the interview, this is a series. Each text could stand on its own. But I was anticipating at least a third book. So let's hope that the popularity of this series, which it really richly deserves, takes off, and we'll get to see yet another volume in it.
Yes, that's right. And they are great books that each could stand on its own, and then the two work really well together. And it's interesting, we didn't really talk about this much, but I found that, and without giving anything away, that both Compass South and Knife's Edge have a somewhat similar structure, especially the ending, because with the ending of both books, we have, I guess, something similar going on. And I thought that may be part of a pattern that we can see played out over the rest of the series. But knowing that these are just two volumes now, I think maybe that pattern and that rhythm makes even more sense now.
Yeah, that's true. And, but either way, these are really great books. I think not just for young readers, too, I might add. I think these are the kind of books that parents might enjoy reading with their kids, but also just adults reading them on their own. There's a lot of high adventure. There are a lot of interesting characters that are really well developed, and you want to know more about them. And I think that's really the strength of this series, is that when you, like I closed Knife's Edge, I was like, not only did I want to know more about the story, but I wanted to know more about these characters and their backgrounds. So I'm hoping that it will continue on. But at any rate, it's a beautiful series, and I'm so excited about the fact that these two very talented people are going to continue working together.
That's right. So the pub date for Knife's Edge is June 27th. And in fact, that's also the release date of the paperback version of Compass South. The hardbound original came out almost exactly a year ago. So we want to thank both Rebecca and Hope again for being on the show. And if you want to find great titles like the kind that these guys write, you have to head over to the website of our sponsor, which is Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com, and there you're going to find a whole slew of discounts. That's dcbservice.com. And after you do get your comics there, get in touch with us and let us know what you're going to be reading. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up the phone and dialing 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
Or you can contact us by email at twoguys@comicsalternative.com, or you can get in touch with us individually. I'm Gwen at comicsalternative.com. Derek, how can people reach you?
At Derek@comicsalternative.com. You can also find us all over social media, such as on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com.
Yay. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Derek, as always.
Yes, and we will be back with more interviews in the weeks to come this summer, so check back for those. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Gwen. Have a great month of reading comics.